All right, let's talk. Hi. It's funny that I often think of getting up here and preaching as a discussion, and yet I realize it's more of a monologue. But then again, if you ask my kids, most of our discussions are that way anyway. But no, I appreciate the idea of being, I hope that, I kind of have a dream that as I would preach on a given Sunday, that we'd be able to talk about it throughout the week. That some of you might say, hey, I had some questions about this, or I think you missed an opportunity here, or whatever, that it would be part of our ongoing discussions and conversations. I do see it as something that is much more than just one-way communication, because I think deep conversation is key. And I really believe that as we move forward in our faith, conversation, connection and conversation is a huge part of that. For example, one of the main thrusts of the way we do discipleship around here is this idea of having conversations with you over issues and things of faith. Matter of fact, right now, Sony and I have been meeting weekly on Zoom, but to make that convenient, and we go over topics each and every week, except I think I bagged out on you last week, didn't I? Yeah. But the idea of just having an ongoing conversation, because that's really what it is. We have a question, we have some scripture, and we talk. And if you would like to participate in something like that, just a kind of a one-on-one conversation, either via Zoom or in person, I would be happy to do that, whether it's weekly or less regularly than that. Because I think conversation is key for us to really understand what God's doing, how we operate together, how we go forward in our faith. And unfortunately, though, I think our culture really has some things that works against the idea of having deep conversations. That we often have very surfacey, very shallow conversations. There's a few things that work against us. When you go to a retail place and you get something and they say, have a nice day. Or somebody asks how you're doing and you say, fine. I don't actually have a problem with that. I think that's absolutely appropriate. I think it's appropriate to have very surfacey things initially. And when you talk to somebody, say, hi, how's it going? I have been showing up at this one particular place nearly every day to get some coffee. And there's another patron there who every morning, it's like, good morning. I don't know her name. And she doesn't know mine, but we say good morning and hi and how are you doing? And have a little bit back and forth, which I think is fine. I think it's appropriate. I think it's polite. The problem is that those are supposed to be like opening salvos to deeper conversations. While they may be the bread and butter of our waves to our neighbors and interaction with cashiers, with our friends and people where you could otherwise be close to, we can have that as well, but it should get deeper. It should be longer conversations. And as we go deeper, and I think that's the problem. I think our real problem, the reason we don't have deep conversations as a culture very much, first is time. We don't want to spend the time. We don't have the time. As a matter of fact, we look at conversations as time killers. We're driving up to our home, and there's that one neighbor who's retired and seems to want to talk, and we're hoping we can get by with just a wave and get in real quick and not have to talk to him. Because we don't have time, or we want to move past, or we don't want to have these longer, deeper conversations. We're busy. Okay, I hear it. I'll go by quick. I know you're struggling, but let me just hear you real quick, and then I got to go. And that really interferes with our ability to have important conversations. Also, I think the manner that which we communicate is a problem as well. The fact that we're doing more and more of our communication via devices can be a problem. I mean, how deep can the conversation be when we text back and forth? When we actually actively avoid phone conversations, most people now are going to spend more of their time texting on their phone than they're going to actually talking on it. And that's difficult to have anything deep. Maybe you've heard the statistic that 20% of our conversations are verbal, that 80% has to do with the nonverbal. That's kind of actually hard to deal with. Either those statistics are tough. It depends on how you define it. I did see a study this week that's more like 55% or better yet, another way to put it, 45% of our conversation has to do with the words. Everything else has to do with being in person and talking and the clues and the context and everything else. And so, of course, our conversations are going to be shallow. Of course, they're not going to be very deep. And it has an impact. It has an impact on us. This past week, our Vice Admiral Worthy put our Surgeon General. It was written that widespread loneliness in the U.S. poses health risks as deadly as smoking a dozen cigarettes daily. That we are having a nationwide epidemic of loneliness. Goes on later to say that the loneliness epidemic is hitting young people ages 15 to 25 especially hard. That age group has reported a 70% drop in time spent with friends during the same period. That we are not doing well connecting. We are lonely, and it's affecting us. Anxiety and depression and things are just way, way up. And we are separated and alone. And I say, if we only had 1 year to live, we've been doing this series, 1 year to live. And with this idea that say, let's just pretend, we started this at the beginning of the year, saying, if we just had 1 year, just 1 year, we knew that 2023 was our last year. Would we live any differently than we do, not thinking this is the last? And for those of you keeping count, this is May. A third of that year has been gone. 4 months out of the 12 that we were in this thought experiment that we have has disappeared. We don't get that back, and we're down to 8 months. And if we knew we only had 8 months left, would we be texting folks? Would we be having just surface conversations, or would we want to spend some significant time to say some really important things to one another? There are people in our lives that we would want to be able to have a deep conversation, to say the important things we've wanted to say. Maybe there's a conversation where we need to ask for forgiveness of someone. Maybe there's conversations where we want to share past memories, and we'd spend our last days, our last months, really talking and saying, hey, remember when, and this meant so much to me. Or maybe just really listening to someone for the first time. I think we would long to do that. I think we are horrible at doing it. It's not in our cultural makeup. We are going to have to swim upstream. We're going to have to learn some skills. We're going to have to approach life differently to be able to be less lonely, less disconnected, more in terms of deep conversation. So this morning I want to just share with you some aphorisms that have guided me, that I think are certainly scriptural, at least in principle, and share with that as skills and things for us to take to be able to deepen our conversations, to be able to have better conversations, because we're so out of practice and our culture doesn't teach us. So the first that I want to offer you is context is everything. Context is everything. When I say that, when I was taking Greek in seminary, we would often ask a professor, what does this mean? What does this word mean? When we see this in the Bible, what does it mean? And his response would always be, context is everything. Words mean what they mean. They don't mean what they say, they mean what they mean. And for you to understand what they mean, you have to understand the context. You have to understand, how is that word used in this sentence? How is it used in this chapter? How is it used in the book? How is it used in the Bible generally? How is it used in culture? You have to understand the context to really understand what's being said. Because if you look at just the word, you look at just the words, you don't really know what they mean, even if you know what it says. Sometimes my daughter will say, "Shut up, Dad, nobody likes you." And she says that to me, and she's over there embarrassed, everybody's staring at her. But no, the thing is I understand the context. The context isn't mean. The context is usually an exasperation of when I pointed out that she was wrong for the billionth time or something, or whatever, and she says and says that, and we know it's a joke and it's fun and we smile and we laugh, even though that's not what the words say, right? The words sound disrespectful, but we understand the context. I understand the context of not only that moment and what's going on, I understand the context of our history together. I understand that she doesn't really mean disrespect. And so that context is everything. And one of the biggest pieces of context that you and I need to get across when our relationship, if we want deep, meaningful relationships with deep, meaningful conversation, is the context of sharing our heart. You know, Oswald Chambers, well, supposedly, this feel like a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I want to get there. There was this quote that I had read by Oswald Chambers, or somebody had said that, and when I hear a quote, I want to share it. I go online and I try to find the source of the quote to say, because I don't want to give the wrong attribution, and I could not find this. I saw, you know, so many people put up quote by Oswald Chambers that says something to the effect of, you know, what is inside of us, what we think, what we feel, is what becomes real and actual. And so it's important, the implication being what's inside is important to deal with, and we need to be able to share that. And so as I'm looking for this quote, I can't find it anywhere. I see people just share it and different attributions, Thomas Carlyle, whoever that is, and that kind of stuff. So I went to, are you guys familiar with ChatGPT? Some of you are. It's this language learning model thing, and you can have a conversation. You can have this text conversation with this computer program that back and forth, and as you talk. And so Microsoft, specifically Bing, has that right on their website. So I go to that, and I'm like, well, let's try it this way. Let's just ask their little chat robot thing, you know, where's this from? And I said, so where's this quote from? And they're like, well, it's from Thomas Carlyle. And I'm like, well, what source from Thomas Carlyle? It says, well, it's an Oswald Chambers book. And I'm like, what? Which one? Like, what? It's all over the map, and so I couldn't locate it. But here's what's really fascinating as I began to think about this. The idea of computer language, of having a conversation with a computer. If you were, I don't know, I could, because you can ask ChatGPT, you can ask these computers to do anything. I can ask it to, and I've asked it to write how to make a peanut butter sandwich in a iambic pentameter. And so, like Shakespeare, it tells me how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And the thing is, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to play with. But if I were to, this program were to give you a poem declaring its love for you, or if it were to, you know, there's this thing that's saying, you know, you're struggling and your computer, you know, Alexa, make me feel better. And it says, oh, you're a great person. I love you. Like, how many of us would find that helpful? Like, I would dare say most of us would say, no, this is ridiculous. It's just some computer program. There's nothing behind it. They're just words. Which speaks to this point. Context is everything. It's not the words, it's what's behind it. And we know there's no heart. There's nothing revealed behind this computer that helps us, that means anything to us. And the reverse is also true. If you want to have meaningful conversations, you want your words to have meaning and power, it can't be just what you say. You have to be willing to reveal your heart to people. You have to be willing to reveal and be vulnerable about what's inside, to share what's really going on with you, and to be vulnerable in that. And I know that that's hard because, see, when we share with somebody, there's a chance that they'll really hear our heart, that they'll hear something deep, but there's also a chance that they'll completely reject us. They'll think we're idiots. They'll want nothing to do with us. That's possible. And because of that, we're scared. We do so much to just very limit what we share with people and how we talk with folks. I can't think of a more dramatic example than that of God himself. John 1:1 tells us that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. For those of you who aren't familiar, and the beginning to John, as it's different than the other Gospels, as it's talking about the beginning, this language that John is using, calling Jesus the Word, has to do with all about Greek philosophy, this idea of the Word and what the Word means. And it's this abstract concept. It's an abstract concept, for want of a better term, it's the logic behind all of reality. And so, in many ways, as John is saying, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Most of your Greek philosophers at the time would have been like, okay, I think I get what you're getting at. When he says the Word was God, now that would be a little weirder. That'd be a little weirder because when they thought of gods, they thought of them as basically superhumans. I mean, the Marvel superheroes are probably more of an example of what the Greeks thought of as gods than our concept of who God really is. And so, but they have this idea, okay, this abstract principle of word and logic and meaning, maybe even conversation. This abstract sense. And so John goes on in his chapter, and he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then later, way down in verse 14, he says, and the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. You see, the thing that is just amazing about this concept is that the Word, this idea, this abstract, the God of the universe, this thing that's just out there, a metaphysical ground of all being, it's out there, and says, came and became with us. Revealed in a whole new way. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. You see, you got to understand that the God of the universe, the Lord Almighty, the maker of everything that is, the entire multiverse of everything, like this God came to be among us and dwelt among us to show us his heart. We know about truth and grace and his glory because he came to reveal that. Not everybody accepted it. He risked that there were those who reject him, those who would mock him, even those who would kill him. But thought that revealing who he was, that maybe it would mean something, that maybe as you hear of a God who loves you, who understands you, who forgives you, who knows who you are, and knows all the faults and all the things about you, but loves you anyway, that maybe you could hear that if you knew and could see him. Matter of fact, that's why it is said when Jesus was talking, Philip was one time saying, hey, we're ready for you to show us the Father. And Jesus is like, what do you mean? Matter of fact, here's his response. Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. You know, God, I am showing you who I am. This is me. You want to know what I'm like? Here, I am laid bare. I am showing you who I am. And I share this for a couple of reasons. One is I think at one level, we need to hear a God who has revealed himself. I mean, when God talks about death and sin and brokenness, and we see this, and we can hear maybe that of ourselves because we see a God who's been willing to reveal himself as truth and grace and love. And I'm hoping that you can hear that. But the other reason I think it's important is because I think we should imitate it. And that's literally what the word Christian means, right? One who is imitating Christ, who has become a little Christ. That we are to do that and to imitate God, that in our relationships, for those we want to share, that we want to talk to, that we want to have deep connection with, it's going to mean we have to be vulnerable and reveal who we are. Because context is everything. Second aphorism. Listening well is a superpower. I literally took that line from a book by Kevin Kelly, Excellent Advice for Living Wisdom I Wish I'd Known Earlier. Now, I say I take it from the book. I didn't actually read the book. I listened to an interview of Kevin Kelly as he was talking about it, and specifically this line about listening well. And he said something that was really interesting. He says, right, so you need to go at least 3 times. But you would say to someone while listening, is there more? And then they're talking. And then you say, is there more? And then you go. And by that point, you're really getting to the heart of the matter. You've got all the way, and you let them go through all the obvious stuff and the cliche stuff. And then the third is there more? And then you'll hear the real story. And what he means by that is this idea, and I think it's brilliant, it's to say, when you are talking to folks and when you're listening well, most of us do not listen well. When we are having a conversation with someone, it's very quick that it could be some of those things we talked about earlier. We've got time pressures. We want to just get this conversation over. We only have a limited amount of time. We need to get to it. Yeah. I got to jump. I've got a meeting after this. Let's get to the heart of the matter. And we got to hurry up. And so we don't listen well. Or maybe we're in a discussion. We want to make sure we get our point across. And so we're thinking about what we're going to say. We don't listen well. But listening well is a superpower, to be able to do it and to just be present and to ask somebody as they share something. Is there more? No, you've shared this with me. Is there more? And now, and this whole point that you got to keep going and ask again and again. Now, I'm not advocating that we actually do this. I mean, we can try. It may be helpful. I'd love to hear your response if that's helpful. But what it's really getting at is this idea that we have to train a couple of different people. One, we have to train ourselves to listen. That when somebody tells us something, we should get curious. We should want to know more. Tell me more about that. What's going on? What's really behind it? We need to train ourselves to listen even better. But secondly, we need to train them. We need to train them in a couple things. One, that we do really care and we want to hear. But also, this idea is that often when I am sharing something with you, it's off the top of my head and I'm just saying what's going on and I don't even really know what the deeper issue is. You know, I say, hey, I'm really angry today. Some guy flipped me off in traffic and still like whatever it's going on. And well, Bill, what's going on with that? Why does that even bother you? Well, I don't know. And then I hadn't even really thought about it. Maybe just you asking me helps me to think about it more. What is really at stake? What's really going on? We have a whole place in social media where the whole idea is for us to just share our hot takes. As if somehow everybody needs to know, have you spoken on the issue of the day? Have you had something about, did you see this news story in New York and what's your take on it? But how about we just come to a place of just listening sometimes? How about even just with God? You know, God was talking, sharing, well, in the Psalms, here's the passage. Whoops, that was an old one. Ignore that. Be still and know that I am God. He says in Psalms 46. Now that psalm, what it's talking about is there's huge stuff going on in the world, wars and nations falling and all this kind of stuff. And God's saying, in the midst of all that and all the busyness and the muchness and the din of it all, you need to realize I've got the bigger picture. Just be still and know that I am God. And I wonder how good we are at being still and just knowing God is at work in somebody else's life, what's going on in their lives, just to be still and listen. Or do we have to have the fix? We have to have the hot take. We have to jump in. You don't have to be a pastor or a counselor or some professional to know. Just about everybody you come into contact with is hurting. I was praying for you guys this morning, and as I'm going around the room and looking and praying for you, like I know some of the hard things you guys are going through. And it's breaking my heart. And I consider it pure sacred that you're willing to share some of those things with me. And I hope in the midst of that I can listen well. And I know equally that each and every one of us, not only are a number of us just really hurting, we have dreams and hopes. And when you think about the people you know in your life, do you know their hurts? Do you know their dreams? Do you know their hopes? I think if we only had 8 months left to live, we'd want to know those. Listening well is a superpower. Number 3, life happens at the speed of trust. Specifically, I'm thinking in the passage in James 5:12, above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned. And what he means in the midst of that is this idea that when we speak, can we be trusted? When we say, hey, I'll see you tomorrow at this time. I'll see you next week. I'll be around. I'll be there when you need me. Hey, let me help you. Or even when I say something, can I be trusted? This is so vital. This verse was so vital to the early friends. I mean, you've seen this. I've shared this before, but when they have like Quaker oats, do you know where that came from? It wasn't founded by a Quaker. It wasn't founded by somebody in a Friends church. It was just called that because Quakers had gotten so used to living out this reality of, I'm going to say yes, and my yes means yes, and my no means no. And they had such a reputation for speaking the truth and being honest that Quaker became synonymous with honest. So much so that when they said Quaker oats, everybody just understood honest oats. These are real, these are honest, these are true oats, just like all those Quakers were. And I wonder, could that be said of us now, that the Friends Church has this reputation of just saying what they mean. They took this so seriously, their yes and no, that they refused to swear in court. When they go into court and say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? They're saying, no, I'm not going to swear at all. The Bible tells me not to. And they got in trouble for some of that. Sometimes even went to jail, like, you got to swear. They said, no, I will affirm. I will let my yes be yes. When I say yes, it's true. When I say no, it's true because I'm going to be honest. I'm as honest now as I ever will be, which I always thought was kind of funny anyway. Right? Do you really, really pinky promise to tell the truth this time? Like, how are you going to trust somebody who says, oh yeah, this time I'm really telling the truth. Forget all that other stuff. But somebody who just develops a reputation in so fact that right now in common American jurisprudence, if you were to go in court now and you were to say, I affirm to tell the truth, I know somebody who did this. They were called to a witness stand and his friend says, I affirm to tell the truth. The judge had to stop everybody and says, okay, you need to explain what's going on and where this comes from. And to explain that this man is saying he's going to be honest. But that he doesn't have different levels of honesty. He's got the I promise, I swear honesty and then the everyday honesty. And I think that we need to develop that kind of honesty with people. When we talk, do the people around us trust us? When we say we're going to be there, when we give them an opinion, do they trust that it's real or are they just saying that? I got in trouble this past week. Lexi comes up to me and says, Dad, do you like my new purse? And I said, nope. Nope, don't like it. She's like, what do you mean you don't like it? Isn't it cute? I'm like, I don't know. It looks like small and unfun. And she's like, pfft. Well, I asked your opinion, but I don't need your validation. And she's like, which the thing is, I didn't like it because I don't really care. I mean, it's not a purse I would wear. But the real issue is that then part of that is, I want Lexi to know. Well, truth is, I should probably be a little more polite and kind in the moment. But still tell the truth. I want her to know that when I tell her something like, I love you, I'm proud of you, that she knows her dad's going to tell her the truth. And that he doesn't just say stuff to just say it. And life happens at the speed of trust. That as you can trust people, that even, and none of us are perfect, right? None of us are perfect. We don't always live up to what we say, but even in the midst of that, can we be the kind of people that when we mess up, we fess up? That we just own it, say, yes, I blew it. That was wrong, I'm sorry. Like being honest people, without it, we're not going to have deep conversations. If we're willing to hide behind our lies, but instead to speak truthfully. Lastly, to pray and talk, because here's your homework. I think we need to be willing to just pray and ask God about this next step. Because the next step is, I think you and I need to have some conversations. Maybe with each other, maybe with someone else. But can we, maybe even just during open worship, just spend some time asking God some important questions. And I think he can honor that. He mentions in Jeremiah an unrelated event, but he says, call to me, I'll answer you, tell you great and unsearchable things that you do not know. Some of us don't know the conversations we need to have. We don't even know where to start with some of the people in our lives. But maybe here during open worship that we would just sit for a little bit and ask God, maybe first, who do I need to have a conversation with? Is there somebody in my life, maybe that's kind of surfacey, a neighbor, a cashier, somebody I don't know very well? Maybe it's somebody I know really well. Maybe it's my spouse or my child or a good friend. Maybe it's a parent, and to have a tough conversation with them. And I don't mean tough as in it's necessarily going to be hurtful. It may be. But one that's just like, it's hard because I'm going to have to be vulnerable. I'm going to have to share my heart. I'm going to have to talk about things that are uncomfortable for me. Maybe it's a simple, I love you that needs to be said. Or a simple, forgive me. I don't know. But is there a thing that we can ask God this morning, who does he have in mind that we should have a conversation with? And then we ask him how. How do I communicate best? How do I reveal my heart? How do I say to my wife in a way that she'll hear in a new way or in a better way that I love you? How do I encourage my friend who is struggling? What can I say? And maybe even this morning you can plan when. You can sit before God and say, God, when can I have this conversation? Who do I need to have it with? How am I going to say it? Can you imagine what our community would be like, even within the confines of this walls, but if we became the kind of people who would have deep, meaningful conversations, not only with one another, but with God himself. I think that's a vision worth living into, and if we only had a few months to live, I think it's how we want to live. Let's do it now. Let's pray. Lord, I want to just thank you for revealing your heart. I mean, there are some things I suppose I probably would have known about you if I had never read Scripture, if I'd never even known about Jesus. Like I could look at the universe and think about time and how it had a beginning. I could see that there is order, and I just learned some things about you, but there's some things I would never know if you hadn't revealed who you are. Of your love and your truth and your grace, your desire for connection with us. And I thank you for revealing that. And I want to honor that, Lord. I want to lean into what you've shown me. And I thank you that you are a safe place, that you know all the dark, difficult things in my soul, and that I can share with you of my sin and my struggles and my doubt and my fears and all that stuff. That in many ways when I pray to you, I'm admitting out loud, sometimes even for the first time, something I know you already know. But that we can have that connection is meaningful. Especially knowing that you know it all anyway. And despite my failings, not only my sin of commission, the things I do that I shouldn't do, but the things that I should be doing that I'm not doing, and that you see and say, Bill, I already know it. I've chosen you anyway. And I hear it because I know you. Help me to be that kind of person to my spouse, to my kids, to my extended family, to my friends, to my church, in my community. Help me be the kind of person that speaks truthfully and honestly, that listens well, but is willing to be vulnerable and share my heart. In Jesus' name, amen.